who is liable for violations of the Shops and Establishments Act. Now, the Act says that the person who is liable is Factories Act, remember, said that your occupier is liable, and the occupier could denominate anybody else who should also be charged and be made liable for it. Now, let us see here who is liable, okay? It says, first, determination of the employer for the purpose of the Act. So, where the establishment is a firm, any one of the individual partners or members may be prosecuted and punished under the Act. So this is more than just the occupier, okay? Where the owner is a company, any one of the directors thereof. In case of a private company, this is the big one, okay? Any shareholder may be prosecuted and punished. So many private companies have venture capital investors, right? They have angel investors as shareholders, and they are professionally managed, professionally run. But this act does not care about who's going to be liable. It says that any shareholder can be liable, which means even an investor can be liable. Now look at this. The company may give notice to the inspector that it has nominated a director, or for a private company, a specific shareholder who will be deemed to be the occupier in the establishment. If you don't do this, then the risk is on all the shareholders. And then when there is a violation, what does the occupier have to say to actually, not be punished? He will need to show that due diligence was exercised, and whatever is the act that represents the violation was committed without his knowledge, consent, or connivance. So one thing we see that while the number of acts in labor laws are huge, there's a huge number of statutory notifications and legislations, but the important part is that thankfully some of the provisions are similar, such as having to explain that you've exercised due diligence, and the second part being that the offense being committed without your knowledge, consent, or connivance, or willful neglect or default. Now, it's not easy to fulfill this standard. You should know that. Like, you should have to say that despite all your precautions, you had done this. Now, if you look at most young organizations which are growing, and they don't have a lot of sophisticated processes in place. So typically what happens? The person has no clue that these things can happen, and there is a violation. Like, the director may not know that he has to even comply with this part of the law, and then there is a violation. So he cannot say that he exercised any kind of due diligence, or there was this was committed without his knowledge. Well, he did not know about it, but this is not the kind of standard that the law requires. The law requires a standard where everything was done to protect or prevent from this. So at least being a director, you needed to have a system, let's say a checklist that needed to be complied with by your organization. And you should have ensured that there are people who are there to enforce this compliance. And then you should have had measures to review this compliance. And after that, if somehow there's a violation, maybe you can say that you had exercised due diligence and this happened without your knowledge or default. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for you to establish this. The next question, how does this offense get, how do proceedings for these kind of violations be initiated? So no prosecution under this act or rules will be initiated except by the sanction of the chief inspector. So let's say you have your own office, and next to you is the competitor's office, right? And now you want that competitor's office to shut down, and you know that they are not complying with the Shops and Establishments Act. You cannot initiate a complaint directly because you need the sanction of the chief inspector. You can go to the chief inspector. If the chief inspector starts it, then it's a different thing. Otherwise, it will not work. Yeah, just you need to remember that. So how how prosecution or proceedings for violation are initiated under different labor laws, that is very important for you to know.